The Fuji GFX 100S comes equipped with a medium format sensor capable of shooting 102 megapixel RAW photos, 4K 10-bit internal F-log footage, and it's only slightly bigger than the APS-C mirrorless flagship, the Fuji X-T4. So for $6,000 USD, how does this camera perform and who is it for? We're gonna jump into all that stuff today. Now, to preface this video, let me clarify that I am not a high-end photographer by any means. I'm more of a video boy that dabbles in photography. And on the contrary, the GFX 100S is built primarily for high-end photography, but also happens to dabble in video pretty damn well. But let's start by talking about the build quality. When I first picked up this camera, I gotta admit I was pretty hyped. I got very excited just to have this thing in my hands. But after spending a full week with it, I got accustomed to it, and I've realized that it doesn't have that sense of luxury that I kind of expected this camera to have. But I think it's a good thing. You might not want strangers when you're walking around to know that you have a $6,000 camera strapped to your body. It's kind of nice that it's a very minimal looking camera, not too much branding, it's all plain black. It's kind of like having a normal car with a really powerful engine under the hood. There are a few things about the build quality that do bug me. First of all, I really wish this camera had a circular dial for your right thumb, but it only has this little rubber nipple for selecting menu items and navigating through menu. It's pretty frustrating. It's not easy to use, and your thumb can kind of slip off of it. At the very least, it would have been nice to see a rubber D-pad, kind of like on the Fuji X-T4 and X-T3. There's also the option of using the touchscreen for menu navigation, but that tends to slow me down in the field, or sometimes my nose will bump into it if it's trying to switch between screen and EVF automatically. The viewfinder is the exact same resolution as the X-T4's viewfinder, 3.6 million dots. And this was also a little bit disappointing to me. The viewfinder's fine, it's okay, but I expected something more premium loaded into this beast of a camera. My Sony a7S III, for example, has a 9.4 million dot viewfinder, and it's absolutely beautiful. Even when I'm shooting video, I kind of gravitate toward the EVF because it's just a joy to use. It's very vibrant and big and sharp. The tilty screen is fine, no complaints there. It's not amazing either, but I do wish that all cameras now would just adapt the Panasonic S1H flip screen design. It's so good because it kind of makes photographers and videographers happy. Either way, you'd be pretty much delusional to try to vlog with this thing. Medium format vlog. How dumb is this? Autofocus. We're at 32 mil on this lens, which is wider than that because the sensor's bigger than frickin' full frame. Autofocus, let's frickin' talk about it. In photo mode with plenty of light, you can actually get really nice results, even in burst modes. It's definitely worth spending time with each of your lenses for the GFX 100S to tune your settings for each individual lens. That's kind of a thing with Fuji. You really need to take your time with each lens and set the autofocus up for that lens. I know it's kind of a hassle, and I wish the autofocus was just really, really fast like Canon or Sony, where it basically just locks on. But I think the design of Fuji's autofocus paired with their lenses just isn't super, super fast. But it's definitely manageable on this camera, and I got great results, so I'm happy with it. I tested the 32 to 64 f4 lens and the 110 f2, which we're shooting on right now. And surprisingly, this lens, the 110, performed way better with autofocus, like significantly better, both for photo and video. In video mode, the 32 to 64 was a total drag. Like, we went through every single autofocus setting, changed the speed variation and everything, the tracking sensitivity, and we could not get that lens to give us decent autofocus results. This 110 millimeter just totally outperformed it. And I'm using it right now. I'm using autofocus in this setting, and we have eye tracking on, and it seems to be performing pretty good. We also got decent results in video with the 110, just using a center box with eye tracking turned off. That way, when you pan the camera, it just kind of focuses on whatever is in that little area zone. The 100S is reminding me a lot of the X-T4, especially in the IBIS department. I know a lot of you guys that watch my videos are die-hard Fuji juicers, and I don't blame you. I love a good juice myself. But we gotta be honest with ourselves, and we gotta call out Fuji for things that they can improve. The IBIS in the 100S, as well as the X-T4, in my opinion, is not amazing. It's not great, and I don't trust it in a lot of situations. However, in photo mode, it's actually quite good, especially when you're shooting in low light and you need to open up your shutter a little bit just to get a little extra drop of light. I want to have sympathy for this camera and say, well, how could Fuji make the IBIS good? The sensor's huge, it would be hard to stabilize it, yada, yada, yada. But we've seen from the X-T4, which has a much smaller APS-C sensor, that the IBIS is still pretty wonky. If you're standing still and doing very basic handheld shots with maybe a little bit of panning and tilting, you'll be fine. You'll get away with just using the regular IBIS. But once you start introducing movement like walking or just a little bit more aggressive styles of filming, the IBIS is gonna start to introduce some weird looking image stuff. You'll see some warping in the corners. You might start to see some seasick looking stuff. And if I wanted that, I would just watch Pirates of the Caribbean with my girlfriend and drink wine. I thought maybe I would get better results by adding the digital stabilization on top of IBIS, but it got even weirder, in my opinion, with the walking movement. So I tried IS Boost on top of all three of those, and that was just really wonky. It made it look like the background was circulating around Connor. I also tried using just straight up IBIS without the digital, but the IS Boost on as well. All of them are just like okay, but I would never use it in a professional setting, for sure. I would say if you're gonna use the GFX 100S for video and you need really smooth footage, just save yourself a hassle and put it on a gimbal and then use the regular IBIS. Test it with just the gimbal and then test it with the gimbal plus regular IBIS. That's what I've done with the X-T4 in a professional environment. I've always gotten decent results like that, so that's what I would recommend, but once again, you gotta run your own tests. All right, let's talk about the video quality. This is where I get a little bit excited. And for all of us Fuji fam out there wishing that Fuji would come out with a full frame camera, they've already pretty much said they're not going to. They're just doing APS-C in medium format for now. This is as close as we're gonna get, and it's pretty damn good. The footage looks great. It's kind of like a super X-T4. It's really awesome. The internal F-Log 10-bit 420 is a dream to work with, and you can get 422 out over HDMI to an Atomos, which we're doing right now for this talking head segment. And if you don't want to mess with log footage and color grading and all that stuff, you can shoot with all of their internal film simulations, and some of them look really cool in video, and you wouldn't have to do much in post, if anything. The max frame rate in 4K DCI on this camera is 30 frames per second, which is 80% slow motion. So you get a little bit of that dreamy effect, but I wish we could get 4K 60 to get dreamy creamy, because that would be so sick. Just this beautiful medium format, shallow depth of field footage in 40% speed slow motion. If you do need more slow motion, you can shoot in 2K and get 60 frames per second. It looks fine. It's definitely not as sharp as 4K, obviously, but it's workable if you need a little bit of slow motion. I've never shot on medium format before, but it gives you this truly larger than life feel where your subject feels so isolated from both the foreground and the background, especially on a lens like this, the 110 at f2. I think we're at f2.8 right now, but still, as you can see, like it just kind of cuts me out of the frame, and it looks cool. It looks awesome. I've always been a fan of shallow depth of field. Bite me, I don't care. I love it. And talking about this larger than life feel leads me to our next segment, photo. My microphone fell off, so I'm gonna put this back on. Stay. 102 megapixels on a sensor the size of your average American dinner plate. It's absolutely incredible. Listen, I've been satisfied with the photos from my Sony a7S III, which is 12 megapixels, or the photos from my Fuji X-T4, which I think is 22, question mark? Editor, fix that. So 102 is just insane. It's crazy. There's so much detail, so much room to work with for reframing. And not only does a sensor like this give you insane shallow depth of field, it just gives you a different perspective, a different vibe, as corny as that sounds. To me, honestly, it's kind of like watching a Christopher Nolan film. I'm a huge fan of him, and he shoots most of his stuff on IMAX cameras, which have huge sensors, really high resolution, and it gives you that really larger than life feel, like you're actually in the cinema, like watching this giant story unfold in a cinematic fashion. And I feel like this camera kind of does something similar, but for photography. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a noob in the medium format world, but to me, it just feels like the subject in your photos is just kind of floating inside a dream world. It's a different look on the world around us, and to me, that's the appeal of the medium format sensor. It looks different. It looks larger than life, fuller than full frame. So yeah, this camera is very enticing. It's beautiful, it's high end, it's professional. But who is it actually for? Yes, this camera gives footage and photos a larger than life, dreamy, creamy feel, but it's overkill for most of us. Right off the bat, if you're a hobbyist or a beginner, definitely don't even worry about this camera. I know it's enticing, but consider something smaller like the Fuji XS10 or the Fuji X-T3 even, the X-T4. They have the same sensor, the X-T3 and X-T4, and they're both still wonderful cameras. Connor actually has a great video on comparing the Fuji X-T4 directly to the GFX 100S for some footage and some photos, and both cameras create beautiful results. The GFX is absolutely like next level and just really, really cool looking, but the X-T4 is still really great. And you get a bunch of different lens options that you can adapt to an APS-C sensor like this, whereas the G lens mount is more limited. Why did I say that so slowly? But the GFX will be absolutely amazing for those high-end photographers who need a ton of detail and room to crop and edit intensively or blow up huge prints for freaking billboards and stuff. And maybe they dabble in 4K F-Log video, who knows? What's cool to me is that Fuji has brought down the barrier of entry to the GFX 100 system. And now it's only $6,000 compared to the previous, the GFX 100 was $10,000. That's a pretty big step down in price, and you still get most of the features. It's an incredible camera for a decent price. Yes, this camera has some quirks, but it's also just really fun to use, and I would definitely recommend you try to get your hands on one, maybe using the sponsor of this video, Lens Rentals. Lens Rentals has been working with me since I was just making videos on my other channel to only a few people. They've believed in me since the beginning, and they've been extremely helpful. So here's the deal. When I'm reviewing these expensive cameras like the Fuji GFX 100S, I can't afford to buy them because it's literally more expensive than my car. From SD cards to huge cinema cameras, they have it all. They have a huge selection of products, and they ship it to you really quickly. They send you a return box, return label, so you can ship it back to them quickly. It's a very efficient and helpful process. So go to the link in the description to head over to Lens Rentals and use code ZACH15 at checkout in that little promotional area, because that'll give you a discount on your gear. Thank you so much to Lens Rentals, and thank you so much to you guys, the viewers, for actually supporting these videos, watching these ads. The true OGs, the true homies, watch the ads. So Fuji has stated they're not making full frame cameras. They're focusing on APS-C and medium format. So let's just hope that they continue to improve the functionality of their medium format cameras and keep bringing that cost of entry down. We like to see those numbers dropping, baby. So more of us beginners to intermediate level photographers can experience the dreamy creaminess of medium format Fuji juice. Thanks for watching.